I just gotta say, guys, I don't know where to start on this one. Today on the channel, I'm gonna be talking about an action thriller film called GodIsaBullet that is now available to check out in theaters and will be available to check out on VOD on July 11th. But the big question is it even worth your time? Well, stick around and let's discuss it. GodIsaBullet follows Detective Bob Hightower, who finds his ex-wife murdered and his daughter kidnapped by an insidious cult. With the help of the cult's only female victim escapee, Case Hardin, Hightower and Hardin go down the rabbit hole to try to save his daughter. The film stars Nikolaj Coster-Waldau, Maika Monroe, and Jamie Foxx, and was directed by Nick Cassavetes, and he's done films like The Other Woman, The Notebook, Alpha Dog, and My Sister's Keeper. So my first initial reaction of this film, I saw a trailer for this film probably a couple weeks ago. I never saw it in a theater. I was just looking at what wide releases were going to come out in theaters, and this was one of them. I was like, okay, Jamie Foxx is in this. I haven't seen him in a film in quite a while, so I was like, I'll go ahead and give this film a chance. And for starters, this film is 2.5 hours. We have these two characters. We have a detective here who is trying to find his daughter, and then he has this other woman that escaped from this so-called cult, and she is going to help him track down this cult to try to get his daughter back. And early on in the film, about 5 minutes into the film, we already see them kidnapping this girl, killing a few people, and the plot actually starts up. So we don't get a lot of backstory with any of the characters, which is kind of weird because, again, it's 2.5 hours. And another thing that we don't get a lot of backstory of or really don't know much about is this cult. 2.5 hours and you can't explain the cult and why they're doing what they're doing. The story for this, it's very absurd, it's very ridiculous, it's very sluggish as it goes through. Some of the audio in here is not very good. For instance, when they're in a car, they can't even get the audio right where it's actually close up to their mouths, so it seems like they're talking far away. There are other scenes where, for instance, they go into somebody's house and they're going to shoot them, and the guy is yelling, no, 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 don't shoot me. And the guy, it sounds like he's yelling in a room, and it's very echoey. The film apparently is based on a book, and apparently it is based on a true story, but I found that this film, it had nothing to say. The characters, they have no depth to them. They're very paper thin. There isn't any emotional depth that you actually feel towards these characters. The film, it wants to give you this serious premise, but it comes off as really absurd. For instance, the sheriff here, he's trying to go after these gang members, and there are plenty of moments in this film where this guy should be dead. There's this one point where he gets his stomach slashed, and it's about halfway across his stomach, right? And he should be bleeding out, and he should be really hurting and not able to press on and probably go to a hospital. Well, he just staples his stomach shut. We have another scene where they try to poison him with a snake. The snake actually bites him in the neck. He's getting bit all over in the neck. He literally, after getting bitten by a snake, runs out of his car and runs a guy down and starts punching the hell out of him. And another scene where towards the end of the film, where he gets shot with a flamethrower and he's obviously on fire. You would think that this man, he's getting melted away by the burning fire, and he obviously puts it out, he rolls it out, and then he gets beat by a baseball bat, and then this guy gets up and he starts shooting him like 5 different rounds in the head. I was just like, what is the logic in this? This just comes off extremely goofy, comes off really unrealistic. I mentioned that Jamie Foxx is in this film, but don't get too excited because he's only in the film about 10 to 15 minutes. His part is he basically has an amputated hand, and he's trying to help both this detective and this escaped druggie woman that is with the detective to try to find the cult. And really all he does in the film is he has a role where he's being a tattoo artist, and he gives the sheriff a tattoo because they're going to be going down to Mexico, and he wants to look like he's a gang member. And that's really all he does. But I will say that his makeup looks really strange looking, like the blotches on his skin. It doesn't look really good. And also the tattoos that they use in this film, it seems like they would rub off like really easily, and they would have to reapply them throughout the film. The film also has a lot of violence, and too much violence, I think, and mainly the violence that is towards women in this film. I don't know if the director hates women or the story really has a lot of abuse towards women in the book. I've never read the book, so I can't confirm that, but there are a lot of things in here where women are getting beat up and punched in the face, getting beat with different weapons and stuff. There's even one unnecessary scene where the cult leader actually shoots one of the women in the face, and literally he unloads the gun probably 12 times, and her face is so mangled up and bloody. I was just like, this is really unnecessary. There are other parts in here where somebody gets their throat slashed, and they're obviously dying and bleeding out and blood's pouring out of them, and then they get stabbed like 15 more times. It's just incredibly violent. I was very shocked at the violence and how they were trying to build this cult up, but really don't have a lot of backstory or really any emotional depth with that cult. They don't have any horror moments in here. They have one moment where they try to show this cult-like scenario where they have like a bunch of blood and stuff, but they really just show like a flashback kind of thing. The cult leader is probably the most violent person out of all these characters, but you don't really know why this cult really got started or why they're doing what they're doing. They're just being violent to be violent for the sake of violence. The cult leader literally injects a snake with drugs, and he starts swinging it over his head like it's a rope, like he's Indiana Jones or something. The film, it should have ended probably 10 or so times. It also tries to incorporate this love story between the actual sheriff and the escapee convict woman, and I was just thinking to myself, this is so cringe and forced. And I don't understand why this film is 2.5 hours. This is a film that could be wrapped up in probably 90 minutes to 100 minutes max. And the film is such a slog to get through. I just can't imagine having to sit through this film again because it's just so boring. And I felt like I didn't learn anything about any of the characters. I felt like the cult, it just was kind of there, just being a cult and killing people and murdering people, not having really any presence to really understand why this cult is doing what they're doing, no really origins as to why they're doing what they're doing or how they came about. And the fact that it is a Satanist cult, you would think there are some horror moments, and there's not 1 ounce of horror in this film. So as far as a score for this film, I would give it a 1 out of 5, an absolutely terrible movie, and I just cannot recommend this film. If you have seen it though, I want to know in the comments what you thought about this film, and if you haven't seen it, is it something that you're interested in checking out? Thank you guys for checking out my review, and I will see you guys on my next review.